community manager. So if you are watching us live on YouTube, too bad we don't want to see your comments. When we do, we love you, but maybe next episode because community manager Ellie is not with us today. Okay, I'm going to start the intro.
All right.
My phone. Jesus, hang on a second. It just made a noise to tell me that we went live.
Elise does that every time too.
Yeah, it's not very useful. Okay, I'm actually going to do the intro now, which I wrote ahead of time because I'm a classy act.
Uh-huh.
True story.
Hello, and welcome to Totally Legit Podcast, episode 113 for the week of May 1st, 2017. Today might be a slightly shorter episode than usual, I think, but it's going to be an interesting one. And that's because earlier this week, noted game thinker Ian Bogost posted a column for The Atlantic titled, quote-unquote, "Video games are better without stories." And by the title alone, you can probably assume that it stirred up some strong reactions in the gamosphere. The subtitle of this article was "Film, Television, and Literature All Tell Stories Better. So why are games still obsessed with narrative?" And I think we have some opinions on that. And now I want to give it kind of an accurate summary of his point. And I think this is accurate, is that all the big highlights of modern storytelling in games, so the big ones you can think of, like, say, Gone Home and What Remains of Edith Finch, walking simulators, as it were, are limited by being a game and would be better realized as a traditional time-based narrative, such as an animated story. So he's proposing that interacting with the environment only gets in the way and ruins the pacing. And he kind of gets a few digs in at environmental storytelling as well by asking...
He also totally disses young adult literature.
Oh, no, yeah, I wrote that in my notes to reference later, yeah. He asks, are they really stories when they are really environments? Anyway, so those are some of the issues we're going to discuss in today's episode. With me today, as usual, is my co-host, Erlade. Ellie couldn't be here today. So we've invited back podcast regular and freelance narrative designer, Vajra, to give us perhaps...
True story. True story.
He is a freelance narrative designer.
Yes, but just the way you snuck that in there was just spectacular.
Thank you.
Seattle, go to the puzzle break, folks.
Yes, go to the puzzle break room in this locked room puzzle in Seattle, and you will see Vajra's stories in action. And perhaps you can give us a little artist perspective. Also, you're in our living room.
Yes,
so
that's true.
Hi to the living room. Hi.
Studio B.
Studio B, or as I call it, Studio B, because I clearly am in Studio A. So, but let me start off with Vajra. How's your weekend going? I already know the answer to that, so answer carefully.
No, so far so good. And haven't played much video games, but have been thinking a lot angrily about this Atlantic story. So that's almost as good.
That is almost as good. Era, how's your weekend going?
My weekend will be spectacular in about 30 seconds because you're giving me an opportunity to use the literature degree that I am in terrible debt for.
Yay!
And I never get to use it. I'm very excited, and everything this man says is wrong.
I suggested in our podcast Slack channel, I think on like Tuesday, I'm like, this is a really, controversial article. It'd be a good topic for the podcast. And Era's like, are you trying to make me angry? I knew then that this is going to be a good choice. My weekend has also gone very well. I'm almost to the end of Mass Effect Andromeda. I feel like I'm almost to the end. Every time I make a little bit of progress, like another character pops up, it's like, oh no, but can you please go, collect my 5 chickens and stuff like that. I am really enjoying the game. I'm still really enjoying the game. I know I spoke quite highly of it 2 weeks ago, and I still stand by that. I feel like it could be like 20% shorter though, or I think I'm just at that point I get with all open world games where I get about 100 hours in and I'm like, you know what, just screw it. I'm done with this.
Fuck you, the Hinterlands.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's the same with Dragon Age, it's the same with The Witcher. I hit that magical 100-hour threshold, and then I'm just like, you know what? The wonder and whimsy of this world is over. I just want to be done now.
There is no more whimsy.
Right, whimsy is dead.
There is only Zool.
Yeah, exactly. One thing we did do this weekend is, and I want to kind of talk about this in a future episode, but just because it's kind of au courant, is we watched a lot of Outlast 2 in a Let's Play over the weekend. And it's got a lot of pushback, Outlast 2, because it's particularly gory and terrible. Like, there's a room where you have to walk in a bunch of dead babies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, they put that one in right at the front, so you kind of know what you're getting into. So you're like, well, it's all downhill from here. This is where things start out like the sanity high point, and then things go off the rails from here.
Yeah, so that's I will. We could talk more about that once I've seen the end of it, because people say it redeems itself, but I'm like, how do you redeem walking on a room full of dead babies? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But let's talk about stories in games. Arrow, where do you want to kick this off?
The first place I want to kick off is with a glaring omission in his thesis, which is he doesn't mention theater at all. And I think that is incredibly important when you're talking about interactive storytelling, because theater, it's not just like each one of these media tells a story in a different way. It's not, you can't tell the same story in a movie that you can tell in a novel, that you can tell on stage, that you can tell on a game. And one of my very favorite examples of this, because I'm a big old musical theater nerd, is they made a movie of Little Shop of Horrors, and they had to change the ending after they had already filmed it and spent $1 bajillion filming it. Because in the theater, even though it's an interactive experience, you are by definition distanced from the story. So it was totally cool in the theater that rocks fall and everyone dies. That's the point, that the plant wins. But then they go and do that in the movie, where you are more immersed and it's more personal because you get close-ups and you get to, identify more closely with the characters. They couldn't kill them. So that's
very interesting. I did not know that, the difference between the two. And that's a really good point.
Yeah, they actually cut my very favorite song out because they couldn't put it in the movie, because the whole, they kind of snuck in the theater ending, where the very last shot of the movie is a little baby Audrey in their yard. They kind of snuck that in there, but that's like the Audrey 2 eats everyone, and that's the end of the show on stage, because it's a Faustian story, and that's the point. And you can't do that in a movie. Just like in a book, you can't show, you have to tell, or the other way around. But you know what I mean. There's more descriptive language that you will use in a novel that you won't use in a screenplay. And in a game, I think a narrative game will combine aspects of all of these media, because you are searching for the story and inventing it yourself, as you do with a novel, and it's interactive as it is in theater, and it's also playing for you as it is on a film. And I think where games run into trouble is when they try to tell a film story in a game, or they try to tell a game story in a movie. I mean, have there been any good video game films? There have been fun ones, absolutely. But have there been any good ones?
Well, by what definition of good? Like award-winning, or?
That's what I mean, like a critically successful film as a film.
Yeah, that hasn't happened.
Exactly. And almost always, you'll have people talking about how the book is better than the movie. Very rare occasions, and usually it's because of the book was written by someone, just fapping over their typewriter, that you get a better film. Fight Club and Jaws are two.
That's an excellent description of the process I'm sure he went through writing Fight Club. So yeah, good job.
American Psycho also. Yes. Movie is better than the book.
Yes, that's a good one. Vajra, do you think there's a narrative difference between a book and a video game?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, okay, part of my problem with the article, I'm going to kind of segue back to this for a moment here, is he seems to spend a lot of time comparing video games to novels, but for reasons that I don't entirely understand, that's a bad thing. Both of them kind of tell a linear story, well, not necessarily a linear story, a story that you get from point A, the beginning of the narrative arc, through the conflict to the resolution to an ending. I mean, sometimes that kind of the linearity of the time frame is broken up and you jump around in time in the story, but ultimately there's just, it's telling a story from the beginning where you kind of present the characters to the end. Pretty much any video game with any sort of story behind any sort of narrative arc to it kind of follows that same rule system, whether it jumps around in time, whose perspective you inhabit at any given moment, the reliability of the narrators, all that's kind of up to the writer. I guess from everything I got from that article, it sounds like he's kind of agreeing with my perspective that games have reached about the point where they can tell as good a story as a novel, because as Arrow pointed out, the mediums of screen and stage, there are limits what you can do based on like a written text, because if in the novel you say, let's talk about like cosmic horror, Cthulhu horror, someone encounters a horrible unseen beast with a terrible form that is difficult to describe or even represent on a screen or on a stage. You can do that in a video game because it's all as good as your 3D renderers, your graphics people, your designers. I feel like books, novels specifically, and video games present huge opportunities for narrative that film and stage, particularly, unfortunately, cannot, just because you can defy reality. You can do whatever you want. It's a much more open, blank slate. I feel like video games are just now kind of hitting the point where they're reaching the level of depth of storytelling, the fullness of characters that you see in a good book. And you look at, it's like a very small percentage of games that actually create characters that's, what's the word I'm looking for, that real, that identifiable, that you feel you can have a connection with.
I see where you're going, and I don't disagree necessarily, but I also think that the interactive nature of a video game can make those people more real to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And much like the way that like a musical can tell different stories in different ways than a straight film, because our brains process music differently. So you can say very simplistic things in a song and they'll feel more profound to a listener because they're in verse. And like Final Fantasy X is a great example for me personally, with a story I have been, emotionally invested in for 20 years because I played along with it. I don't know that it necessarily would have had the same effect on me if it had been just a movie. I say just a movie, but or a novel.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really struck me about this article is, he talks about how a lot of these walking simulator games would have been just as good in some sort of like as an animation or a movie or whatever. And I feel like the difference between an interactive and a passive medium is significant. And if I'm just to sit back and watch someone else's story, it doesn't affect me the same as if I'm like first person, I'm looking through their eyes. And I feel like his article kind of completely ignored that. And that's not even getting into games, like Mass Effect, where, you are getting to shape the character. There's a certain tangibility to being able to be that character and interact with things as you would, instead of just sitting on my couch, eating a snack and watching someone else do something.
And also discovering the story, even in these, what he calls the walking simulator games, or like something like Inquisition did this really well, where you pick up the lore in the area where you are. So it's in context, and then that builds the world out for you. And that sense of discovery, that creates that sense of wonder, which then, amplifies the story.
And not all games with stories are created equal. This is the other thing we have to bear in mind here, is that a game like Gone Home has a much different scope, a breadth of narrative design than, say, Dragon Age Inquisition. And, a lot of games, I would agree, would probably do just as well as a movie or as an animation as a game, because their scope is so much smaller. In the same way that there are books that I think would make a great movie, and some might make a good half-hour special.
Yeah.
It's unfair to compare, to say that, because Gone Home is a very narrow game with a very limited perspective and a very linear story, that all games with a narrative and a particular perspective are equally, are equally reducible to a simple animated video.
He also doesn't differentiate, like he includes all narrative games as one unit, and
right.
Some of them suck, and some of them aren't successful, just like some movies aren't successful. And he doesn't even acknowledge the fact that there's a whole lot of garbage out there in every media. I mean, I make a habit of reading garbage novels. That's what I do when I'm in line at the grocery store is I read garbage novels because they're hilariously terrible. And they're not good. They're not successful. They exist. But the percentage of, I mean, getting the gold out of the dross is going to be difficult in every media.
Right. You wouldn't look at this garbage novel and say, like, well, clearly novels are, better without dialogue or something because this is a garbage novel. One thing he touched on, and I quoted it in the intro, was that is it really storytelling when it's environment? And I want to throw that to you first, Vasher, because I know you're a Dark Souls player, and Dark Souls, I haven't played them firsthand. They're lauded for their environmental storytelling. Do you feel that counts as story?
Absolutely. How a story is told to you does not change. I mean, that doesn't increase or decrease its value as a story. A story can be told in the scope of someone sitting down and telling you a folk tale from beginning to end. It can take the form of reading a book. It can take the form of disconnected vignettes that kind of build a scenario. Dark Souls is a great example of this because it's a game where they hand you almost nothing to begin with. Virtually everything you know about the world, the story, comes from your own observation, your own just paying attention. It can be as simple as little half-heard mutterings from a crazy NPC you encounter, or the description of an item you picked up somewhere. Environmental storytelling, it breaks up the narrative into lots of little pieces, and you only are guaranteed to get all of the narrative if you're dedicated to the game you're playing. But it's still a story, and if the writing is good, you can still tell a cracking good yarn, even if it's all broken up in little one-paragraph tablets scattered all over a game world. I think that the notion that environmental storytelling isn't real storytelling is, well, okay, A, it sounds like an elitist book snob. B, it sounds specious. C, I guess
I would like to set it on fire.
Yeah, okay. I kind of feel like this is a bad article and he should feel bad.
Even if games can't tell good stories, saying that environmental, which is bullshit, but even if that were true, saying that environmental storytelling isn't real storytelling is shitting on every single great director and cinematographer and set director and costume designer in film.
Yeah, I have to imagine pretty much every set designer everywhere in Hollywood would have read that and said, "Fuck you, dude."
Exactly. I mean, and just I'm sure Guillermo del Toro is, somewhere he feels a sense of disturbance in the force and doesn't know why. And this is why. It's because this asshole said that what you do isn't real storytelling.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly what he was trying to prove with that statement, but it really didn't generate any goodwill. Yeah.
It's completely wrong. It's so wrong.
One of the rules of writing a good narrative is show, don't tell. And I feel like environmental storytelling plays really nicely into that concept of showing and not telling.
Because you can literally show and not tell. You can tell a lot of story just by what you see in a place.
Yes.
If a great example is in the Fallout series, in the 3D versions, like the modern ones, the folks at Bethesda and Obsidian picked up on this really well too. Were really big about telling little stories with bodies you found from people that died during the nuclear war. So you'd come into like a building and find a body lying on a bed. It's just a skeleton at this point, lying on a bed surrounded by dead flowers. And in the bathroom, you find another skeleton lying in the bathtub with a whole bunch of empty drug containers and empty bottles of vodka lined up next to it. And you kind of say, okay, I see what happened here. There's no narrative. There's nothing is written down. You don't find anything, find out who these people were or why they were there. All you get is this heartbreaking moment where you saw how one person died and someone else couldn't go on without them, and that was without any words at all. And that's the definition of showing, not telling.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. Okay, Era, you mentioned something, and when we were leading in here, you made a little comment about his snark at Gone Home in particular. He called it young adult fiction and said, "quote unquote," talked speciously. If the ultimate, what are we supposed to think if the ultimate bar for meaning in games is set at teen fare?
Oh my god, you motherfucking douchebag.
I have 3 words for this guy. Last of Us.
I have 2 words for this guy, and it's Madeline L'Engle.
I mean,
That's
I
actually
think
better, yeah.
there's nothing
That's actually a better one, yeah.
there's nothing wrong with, I mean, and I admit I am the book snob that's like, oh, we're reading Harry Potter. But there's nothing wrong with teen fare, first of all. And second of all, I think it is, and I mean, I'm sorry to bring the politics into this. I'm not really sorry.
Yeah.
But it's extremely, I don't know, white dude of him to say, well, oh, that's teen fare. And that was one of the
Right.
things I found about this whole article, that it really ignored the fact that so many people whose identities have never been reflected in games can find their identities reflected in these little indie, walking simulators or little, storytelling. And he just totally sort of steamrolled right over all of that.
Yeah, I feel like a pretty poignant story of someone kind of a young person discovering their sexuality, particularly a young woman discovering her sexuality, is a story that doesn't get told very often in popular young adult fiction. I mean, like, not in this sense anyway.
Well,
Right.
it depends
I
on the young adult fiction.
Also true, but I mean, I guess I feel like it's a pretty grown up story, even if it's about young people. I feel like it's pretty profound stories been told about this very subject for a long time. So
You can tell profound stories aiming at children, and I think
yeah,
it is super important to do that. I mean, treating kids like they're idiots and treating the media aimed at them as less than because kids are idiots, so this stuff is all dumb, also does a grave disservice to the people who produce that content and the people who consume it.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, Madeline L'Engle, that not even my very favorite novels, but they're up there. I would say in the top 3. But everyone has read at least one of her books. I'm pretty sure even Lior the Book Snob has read at least one Madeline L'Engle book. And those tell very profound stories, and they're aimed at children. And there is nothing about art that says it must be for adults. There's nothing about stories that must be for adults. I mean, my very favorite book in the entire world is a picture book.
which one?
And it's called The Cookie Tree by Jay Williams. No one has ever heard of it. So it's been out of print as long as I've been alive. So one year I scanned it and I put it on my server, and I would be happy to share it with you.
Nice.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and it's also a super profound story about, wonder and listening to people, and it just because it's young adult fare doesn't make it garbage. And yeah, sure, there's garbage in there. There's garbage for everyone. I mean, there's Desperate Housewives is not for young adults.
But still garbage.
I would just like,
Yeah, I mean, I think writing off something as being like, well, if this is the best we can do is young adult fare, then, whatever to the whole medium. I mean, that's ridiculous. But also not assuming that adults can come to something like Gone Home and be like, hey, I'm also getting something out of this. Just because it wasn't his experience doesn't mean it's not a valid experience. I found the whole article to be very, very reflective of his limited viewpoint and not really taking into consideration the deep variety of narratives that can come out of
dude is
a
not
story.
very well read
Right, well,
at all.
there is that. Yeah. I also think one other point I wanted to make about the article was it completely ignored the games. And I will admit there aren't a lot of them, but there are a number of games that come along that need to be a game to tell their story. And the big one that comes to my mind is Her Story, which came out a couple years ago. And that,
Mhm.
I mean, you are searching through a database of video clips to put together the narrative. There is no way Her Story could exist in some kind of film or book or whatever format. It needs to be a game. And, he just totally Her Story apparently doesn't exist.
Well, part of the problem. Sorry,
No, please go ahead.
sorry. Part of the problem there was he was doing this really weirdly reductive thing where he, and tell me if I misread the article in this, he seemed to be saying because video games have not yet reached the level of interactive storytelling of an imaginary sci-fi future where truly interactive, three-dimensional virtual reality stories are the norm, this medium has failed. He seems to spend a lot of time agonizing over how because video games haven't reached this still technologically impossible level of immersion, that there is no immersion, that it's just there, it may as well not have happened at all. And that is so blinded. Stories like Her Story, I mean, there are so many things that only a video game can really do for interactivity. And it seems like he just sort of waves that off as well. It's not total verisimilitude, so it's shit.
This dude really strikes me as one of those people who says that Citizen Kane is the best film of all time
Oh, God.
without understanding anything about it or why it is so critically lauded. Spoiler alert, it's not the best film of all time. It is the best technical film of all time, not the best story of all time. The cinematography, and it was the first film to ever have a real score behind it that told part of the story in it. Hey, by the way, music can tell stories, asshole. It's not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. And everyone is like, oh, this is the Citizen Kane of games. Yes, it's technically amazing, but it's garbage. It's
Maybe, yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe not the best comparison. Yeah, this article is just all whack. I mean, to be fair, people with columns write columns to get clicks, and boy, it got a lot of clicks.
Many clicks.
Exactly. Ian Bogtrog, you got me. So congratulations, you fucking troll.
Yeah, it got a lot of clicks.
Reaction.
It got a lot of very thoughtful responses. I would go read Austin Walker and Patrick Klepek's 2 responses on Waypoint. I think are both very good at defending stories and games. And it got a lot of angry game developers, particularly indie game developers on Twitter in the days following it. So, Grady got a bunch of clicks, but I think it was
Got a lot of attention. Yeah.
Yeah, paid for another month of server time. That's pretty much all you can do about internet
Right.
journalism right now.
God, that is so true. Era, any further thoughts on this that you want to share?
Makes me tired. So tired. Everything he said was wrong. It's all wrong.
Yeah.
So wrong. I'm sorry that he was so wrong that I was not rageful enough to be hilarious. But it's so wrong, and it makes me tired when it's so wrong.
I mean, that's the thing is, I can't even get really mad about this. I feel like, when this guy announces that, environmental storytelling isn't storytelling, I feel like One Punch Man, okay.
The Globe had a stage in the round for a reason. He's never heard of theater, apparently, ever.
Well,
Yeah, the theater thing is actually an extremely good point that I didn't think of at all. But you're right. He just totally glosses over that whole medium.
I feel like his one out here is you can make stories, games that have no story that can be good if you have very limited expectations from them. If all you're looking for is a time filler, if you want to play some Candy Crush or whatever, that doesn't have a story. You don't need a story for that. You just need to make the colored candies that look the same bump into one another, and you're happy, and there's good sounds. And, a game without story, that's about all you can do.
Even
And those are
Mario
good
has
ones.
story.
Even Mario has a story. But, I mean, if you make games without stories, they're great time fillers and everything, but when was the last time you saw someone cosplaying their favorite gem from Bejeweled?
That's a good point. Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, I can sort of. I'm trying to be gracious here. I can sort of see an interpretation of this where the story can interfere with mechanics. And I think that's something that we have encountered before where, the mechanics of video games are somewhat at odds with the story. Mostly I run into it a lot when, a video game is set up so you can kill and destroy things and the story maybe doesn't necessarily roll with that. So I think there is something legitimate to say along those lines. Whether it's video games are better without stories, no. But sure, story can clash with mechanics. Stories can be bad. Stories can not exist. Oh, this article's so stupid, you guys.
This guy. This guy.
It's so bad.
There are mindless action flicks out there. Why can there not be mindless action games? I mean,
Right.
There exists in this universe room for all kinds of stories told in all kinds of ways. And placing one above the other is ignorant at best.
And just because video games are not at the point of being, a data spike you plug into the base of your skull so you can experience it all in real time, just because we're not there yet doesn't mean we're not going to get there. And I think we should stick with the medium. I don't think we should give up on trying to tell good stories in games. If anything, I think we should continue trying to develop better technology to tell bigger, better stories in games.
Yeah, I feel like you used Doom as an example of a good game that didn't need a story, but then
it had a story.
Not only that, but Doom had the little, your man his icon would get more bloody and whatnot as you progress, and there's some environmental storytelling for you because you'd see your guy being all slowly falling apart, and you feel kind of bad, and he was hurting. Story doesn't have to be totally epic; it could just be a little thing like that.
And it's
I know. All right. I think we've probably covered this article is stupid.
Ian Bogtrog, your story is bad and you should feel bad.
He should never try to tell a narrative story.
That's right. Yeah. Don't try and do that. Yeah, exactly. Era, what video
want to be teen fair.
Yeah, right. What video games have you been playing in the last couple of weeks, Era?
Andromeda and Horizon Zero Dawn, and still trying to finish those. I have a show in 7 weeks, so right now my life is full of lie, because it takes 6 weeks for soap to cure. So, whee!
Oh, no. That kind of puts your Fight Club reference earlier in some perspective.
I think a lot about making soap.
That's cool. Where are you at with Andromeda?
I finished the 3rd planet. About to go to the 4th planet. We all got really sick last week, so I'm kind of behind.
I understand. Yeah.
2 tiny germ factories in the house. That
happens. They are germ factories. I hear that. Vajra, what have you been playing the last couple weeks?
Playing Nier Automata.
Is that the naked robot one?
Yeah, that's the naked robot simulator.
Okay.
Talk about games that tell very bizarre stories.
Well, naked robots.
Yoko Taro is a very strange man. I commend him for his efforts in the field. I've been playing a fair bit of that, fair bit of Dark Souls 3, just because I have a DLC I haven't even touched yet, and that is a great world. For all of their various video game sins, From Software makes beautiful, beautiful games. But yeah, putting them both on ice for a while to work on my own writing. So they're gonna have to go on ice for that.
Your own writing and maybe a little bit of Persona 5. Let's get Persona 5.
Well, yes, Persona 5 is sort of a given. I feel like that's just sort of when that shows up on the PlayStation, I'm going to disappear into a blanket for it to play.
I know.
I've never played a Persona game in my life. I don't even know what they are.
You're missing out.
I hear that, but I also hear people tell me that they would just make me sad and angry.
I'm not sure. Persona 4 Golden is the one that's adapted for mobile, and they took some of the grind out of it. I would definitely recommend that as something to jump into. Plus, mobile makes it kind of nice. You can play it wherever you are. I've also been playing Mass Effect Andromeda. That's it. That's all I've been playing because I am focused on it. I want to get it done, and then I can play Persona 5. That's where I'm at.
Don't be me and pick up a game when you're in the middle of another game, because then you'll never finish the game. I'm sorry, Aloy, I'm coming back soon, I promise.
Horizon Zero Dawn is on my list, but I'm waiting for a gap in my place. Actually, I haven't logged into WoW since the day Mass Effect Andromeda came out. My subscription.
That's true.
I was like, oh, sorry, guildies, I'm still alive.
Broadly speaking.
Broadly
Oh,
speaking.
Alive but in space.
Yeah, and then Persona, and then Horizon Zero Dawn, and then oh my god, there's so many good games to play right now.
This is a good time to be a gamer.
Oh man, and I've got American Gods in 15 minutes as soon as we're done here. So
Oh shit.
Wait, the show?
yeah,
It starts today?
starts tonight. Yes.
Oh, I know what I'm totally not going to pirate off the internet.
I'm kidding, folks. She's kidding. Don't sue us, SARS.
I'm totally kidding.
She's not joking.
That's
She'll cut that out in
awesome.
post.
Let's talk about that in 2 weeks because I am super psyched for that.
I'm actually a little concerned because I've never read the book because Neil Gaiman's prose style doesn't usually do it for me. I appreciate his stories. I just don't really enjoy the way he tells them, which is totally cool. It's fine. Yeah, whatever. But like, I love Orlando Jones. I have forever. And the pictures that they put up for each of the characters got me twitching with my mica, and that makes me nervous. I really don't need any more, but they look so good.
You may be the only person who's watching American Gods for Orlando Jones. You're awesome.
Okay, one of the most fun actors in the world, and one of my favorite folkloric anti-heroes. Just what do you want from me?
Is he playing? He's playing Anansi?
He's playing Anansi.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Nancy himself.
Yeah, I did not
He
know
could be
that.
great.
Yeah, I'm excited for Ian McShane. Ian McShane was
Welch.
born to play Mr. Wednesday. Born for that role. I am so excited. I didn't know that was tonight, though. Yay! Thank you, Era.
Ian McShane dissed one of my favorite books in the whole wide world, and I've been kind of mad at him ever since.
Wow, harsh.
Yeah.
Harsh. What's
It
up?
was when he was in the movie for the book, and he talked about how the book was garbage, but the movie was so terrible, I had to get drunk before I could watch it.
Okay, go on. What movie?
It's called The Seeker. It's young adult. You wouldn't like it.
Oh yeah, he was in the movie of that.
Yes, he was Merriman.
No shit.
Yeah, and all he did was talk about how awful it was, and he didn't read books for children. And this is seriously the most important book of my life.
Well, it sounds like Mr. McShane and I would get along.
In my defense, I did first read it when I was 10.
See, I mean, that's a good defense. That's a solid defense.
And then I
Ally.
turned 11, and Merriman didn't come for me, and I cried the entire birthday. That's how important this book was to me.
All right.
See, Vajra has read the book, so he knows what I'm talking about. I was a very
I
strict
can see
10-year-old.
little Arrow brokenhearted.
Yes, completely broken.
Oh my goodness. All
I
right.
could not make my parents explain why I did not want to party for my birthday and why I was so sad the day after. Could not make them understand.
Kids and people say that children's books don't have very meaningful narratives. So there you go. It ruined your whole birthday. So
It did.
I mean, that's we will be back as reference in 2 weeks where we will talk maybe I'll have finished Mass Effect Andromeda. Maybe we'll have watched some American Gods. We'll see how it goes. You can find us online. We're on Twitter.
To talk about.
Yeah. We're on Twitter at Totally Legit Pod. You can find us online, totallylegitpublishing.com/the podcast. We have all of our previous 112 episodes there, going back like 3 years now or something, which is crazy.
And like
And-
17 of them are episode 69.
No, that is not true, and the math does not work for that. It does not hold. Thank you for watching and or listening, and goodbye. Bye.